9 out of 10 startups fail. Women and minority-led companies receive less than 10% of all venture capital. This is an environment designed for failure. Startup Hype Man's mission is to use the power of story to make success inevitable, not the exception. And this podcast is designed for entrepreneurs to share lessons learned from their stories so that you can figure out what whatever it takes means for your company to make it. Let's kick it.
Yeah, I have everything on Do Not Disturb, so I think we're good.
From the Hype HQ recording studio in Chicago, Illinois, it's Startup Hype Man, the podcast. I am your host and the Startup Hype Man, Raj Nation. Every week we bring you real talk and unpack the behind-the-curtain strategies with the entrepreneurs who are doing it or who have been there, done that, all to help your startup grow up and stand out. Join the Hype Nation to catch every new episode, plus get resources and other stuff that actually help you, not the whack promotional junk that other companies try to shove down your throat. All you have to do is add your email at startuphypeman.com. Ready for some real talk? Time now for me, Raj Nation, to turn it over to, well, me, Raj Nation, for this week's conversation. All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Startup Hype Man, the podcast. Today on the show, we've got Amanda Greenberg. Amanda is the CEO and co-founder of Balloonr. What's Balloonr? Well, it is a platform based on science and research to address how humans actually share information and make decisions. Using Balloonr, you can accelerate your time to wisdom, de-bias decision-making, and establish an idea meritocracy. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It's going to be a great conversation. I already know just from when we've gotten to know each other in a previous phone call. Our topic today, which is something we have never discussed on this show before, is how do you land a big angel investor? Can you tell us why this is something that's relevant to you?
Yeah, so we've received an investment from Jason Calacanis, who I would consider the greatest of all time angel, very prominent in the Valley, and what it does for your company in terms of having that halo effect and the support of someone like that is really game-changing.
And for those who are not familiar, can you just give a little background on Jason Calacanis?
Yeah, so he's known as the unicorn hunter. So has been first money in or really early money in at a number of unicorns. I think, I don't want to get this wrong, but 6 or 7 different unicorns. So Thumbtack, Robinhood, etc. Uber.
Yeah, awesome. So before we get into all of that, we'll keep people on a little cliffhanger. Let's dive into who is Amanda Greenberg. So you've got a pretty, I would say, impressive background. You've been educated from places like University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. You got a bachelor's degree from Dartmouth. Do you consider yourself, here's where I'll start this. Do you consider yourself like an Ivy League person, or did you sort of like work your way into the Ivy League?
That's such an interesting question. So I was born in small town, Ohio. So I grew up in Oxford, Ohio. My dad was a professor at Miami University. My mom was a teacher and then a guidance counselor at a middle school. But I always knew that I wanted to study and go somewhere else. You know, I was kind of born with some big dreams and a drive and willingness to work really hard to get there. In high school, I went away on the summers to like a boarding school just because I wanted to see where I measured up among other students. And so I was always kind of looking beyond and seeing where I would go. And I like really testing myself. So I don't know if I necessarily like consider myself a Ivy League person or whatever that means, but I know that it was a really instrumental step for me, and I kind of had my sights set on that from a really, really young age.
I would peg you just on that description as like the grit needed to succeed in the Ivy League, but not necessarily like of Ivy League blood or of like the East Coast sort of,
No, very Midwest, very Midwest, but had, highly educated parents, which I think helps open a lot of doors, but gritty and Midwest warmth. Yeah, I think that that's how you would describe me. I don't know. I bet you that if you asked, 10 people, they would all say something different about me. But yeah.
The Midwest, it's like, I always say it's like Illinois work ethic, Ohio homeliness, and Minnesota nice.
Yeah.
And Wisconsin somewhere in there too.
There's just something different though, right? So my best friend from Dartmouth grew up out here. So she's from San Francisco area. And she is a doctor. And when she was in medical school and she was doing her residency interview, she went to Ohio and she was like, Amanda, everybody is like you here. Like everyone is like smiling and nice and all that kind of stuff. So we're all similar, I think.
So coming out of Dartmouth, you get a master's in environmental health at UNC Chapel Hill. And then, your foray into the working world, like Balloonr, I know is like backed by science, but you're not necessarily doing like behavioral science things out of the gate, are you? Like you're working as like an intern at the chemist department, and that was still at Dartmouth. But what's your, I guess, where does your career first take you as you go into these sciences?
Yeah, so it really was around behavior change. So when I went to get my master's of science in public health, my work there and my graduate work was all around translating research and science into behavior change campaigns, like programs, messaging, brands that resulted in people changing behavior. Most commonly, my work was around like environmental health issues or, epidemiology, those kinds of things, behavior change things. And so it was there that I really discovered through my work, I needed to get ideas and feedback and information from distributed groups, teams of experts, et cetera, my clients, my team, all these different groups of people. And I couldn't get the information and ideas that I needed. And I tried, everything available to me from surveys, meetings, focus groups, different collaboration tools. And what I found was that I started getting like one-off phone calls and emails from people that ended up being essential to us winning a proposal or having a lot of project success or really key campaign or scientific insight. And so I asked them, why'd you come to me versus everything I made available? And their answers really shocked me. They were all around, I didn't know if my idea was good enough. I didn't know if this was the right place, all those different things. And because I was a researcher and had that background, I dug into the research and was shocked to find that everything that we use that's core to how companies and businesses operate don't actually address how our brains best work in a group setting. And so with that, became really passionate about it and left that field and dove into Balloonr. I had planned to become a public health physician and really work around behavior change there, but I became so passionate about this and knew that that's what I wanted to do with my life.
So was there one program or campaign in particular that sticks out to you that you're like, man, the insights we found were this, and it changed how we did it, how the messaging of the campaign was?
Oh, there's so many different examples. I mean, a lot of it had to do too with like previous experiences of team members or experts. So, it's really hard to know what someone has experience in or knowledge in or where that wisdom is around best practices or improvement or feedback or ideas. And so there's all these different pieces, and oftentimes it's like the combination of multiple people's ideas that resulted in change. And I think there were just numerous pieces, almost, too many to even pinpoint, but tons of different examples.
So this experience, as you said, is what led you to dive straight into Balloonr. So let's do that now in our conversation. Let's dive into Balloonr. I gave the overview of the platform for additional background information. You're at this point, I would peg you as the emerging tech company. You're at 5 employees. You've raised $865,000 to date. And premier or banner clients on your roster include the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, Capital One, Thumbtack, and Google. Obviously, big names that everyone has heard of. So Again, I gave sort of like the abstract description of Balloonr. Do you want to just share, like, in your own words, what's Balloonr? I mean, the website's probably what's in your own words.
Yeah.
But do you want to expand upon anything that I said there about Balloonr?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So I shared a little bit about, the pain point right here, right? Which is like business tools and processes don't address the way our brains work in a group setting. And what they don't account for are louder, more senior voices dominating conversations, tons of different types of really costly cognitive bias, group dynamics. And then, of course, people hold back their best ideas and their most valuable, authentic feedback because of a fear of failure or judgment. And because of this, companies don't get the right data. And this costs companies billions in really bad decision-making, stalled innovation, tons of wasted time. So we built Balloonr, and Balloonr is an anonymous collaborative platform that helps companies and teams really accelerate time to wisdom and create that idea, feedback, information, meritocracy. It's horizontal, so it's used across an organization in a lot of different ways, from process improvement, operations, employee experience, inclusion, product and project work. I mean, you name it, there's a use case for Balloonr. And it's also industry agnostic, so works in any organization, any company, and also can be used beyond and outside the walls of a company to engage clients, vendors, partners, organization, community members, etc.
So let's transition from, we know what Balloonr is now. We've got a really good scope of it. The topic today is on landing a big angel investor. You mentioned Jason Calacanis is yours. His portfolio includes investing in things like Uber. He's known as the unicorn hunter. So I'll ask you this: where do you think is the best starting point for this conversation? Talk about why Balloonr, or why, or how did you go about finding? I'll answer my own question. Talk us through, first off, the decision to say this company needs to raise capital, because not every company should or does need to. So what was your decision between you and your co-founder to say, hey, we got to raise money for this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. And I think too, more and more companies are asking themselves that question just in today's landscape. And it's definitely become, I think even since we started Balloonr, more and more acceptable to bootstrap, show grit, get product out there. And that's really what we did at first. I think it's really confirming for VCs when they know that founders can execute with or without resources, and that they're going to do whatever it takes to bring their vision to the world and make it happen. So I think that that's like the key in terms of that decision point. I think that we at first, we wanted to do it more in an incremental way. So we knew we wanted to get people who really gravitated toward what we were doing. Obviously, like, we're creating a new category. I don't think that what we're doing is out there, but other people might think it's more out there and more abstract. And so we wanted to get people who really understood not only us as founders, but really believed in a balloon-filled future. They really understood what we were doing and how game-changing it was and is. And so I think that's how we made the decision. We knew we wanted to scale and grow quickly as well, after we had proven out a number of different things.
Now, that's the reason why you wanted to raise money in the first place.
Yeah.
Tell me, were you like, okay, well, our best path to this is just find someone who's famous in the investing space and then target them and hunt them down and figure out how to talk to them? Is that what happened? Or what did you kind of fall into it? Talk us through how you ended up getting a conversation with Jason Calacanis.
Yeah, it was a little bit more organic than that. And we have a number of other like high profile angels as well. I'm focusing on Jason because I think that the path is pretty interesting and also like pretty approachable for a lot of people. So another female founder who we share a mutual investor had recommended attending Founder University through one of our networks. And Founder University is a 2 or 3 day free program offered by the launch team, which is Jason's team. And in that, it's like 2 to 3 days of really amazing programming that's all free. that's really just around how to grow, how to get customers, how to fundraise, all these different things. And, it's really focused on them, leveling out that playing field and giving access to the inside scope of how to do these things. And it is really, really eye-opening. So I attended that, and it's interesting because Jason wasn't really on my radar as an angel that we were targeting, but my co-founder Noah, really listened to This Week in Startups and really was tuned into.
And for reference, that's the show that Jason hosts. He hosts a show called This Week in Startups.
Yeah, and he was just tuned into his experiences and what he wrote about, and thought that there would be alignment, not only with what we were building, but with us as founders. And so attended this. As part of that, there's an opportunity to pitch every morning. And so we were one of the companies that pitched. When we pitched, he liked it right away. And he has really strong opinions, right? So I think that that's one of the key things that I want to note is, when you're starting a company, some people are going to love it. Some people are going to hate it. They're going to think it's nothing. Some people are going to be so impressed. Some people aren't. It's just it's all over the place. And what I always say is I really have realized through this process, how investors miss out on big opportunities, because it's almost like feedback whiplash or reaction whiplash. It's fascinating how it's so different. So you just don't really know what you're going to get. And so he really liked it. And he really liked me as a founder. And he just gravitated toward it. So from there, he moved us forward through kind of this program, which is how he makes his initial investments. And so we had the interview for that a few weeks, probably about a month and a half after that, initial pitch, and then also went into diligence, et cetera. And that was really the beginning point of our relationship and having that investment from him.
So it started with going to the event he was hosting, and then from there, as part of it, and the event was Launch Festival, and then from there, as part of the event, there was a pitch night, let's say, pitch competition of some sort. And is that an on stage in front of an audience thing, or that's just in a room one-on-one with him?
It's in a room. So the event was Founder University, which is a little bit different.
Founder University.
Yeah, so it's different. And the reason that's really Founder University is open to anyone to apply to. So
for everyone listening, you can apply to this.
Exactly. And that's the key. And so it was a room at a law firm with the rest of the founders in there. I think there were 40 to 60. And then, those that were pitching went up there, did their 2-minute pitch. And then he gave really candid feedback, and he does sports casting, right? So he'll give immediate feedback on when you're answering questions well, when your credibility goes up or down, just all these little insights that, Jason has that are so important and valuable, and crazy how spot on they are, and just make you a better and better founder.
What was your 2-minute pitch? I mean, if you remember it word for word, I'll give you 2 minutes to do it. If you don't, what did you focus on? And then what was his feedback?
Yeah, it was interesting. So it's not very different from how we pitch it now, except he's, of course, helped us refine it. But it was, I made changes to our pitch the night before that, pretty drastic changes. I wanted to present it differently, and I thought this is a good testing ground. Let me just refine it. And
so what was it before? Can you give us what it was before and then what you changed it to?
Yeah, so before it talked about the problem we were solving a little bit differently. It was, had a different flow. Jason, and this is we're doing your research. I think that's something that's really, really important for landing a big angel, is do your research. Most big angels have tons of resources out there around how they like to be pitched, what they like you to highlight. So Jason likes product, right? He wants to see product right away. He wants to see a demo right away. We didn't lead with the product in the first version of the pitch. So I had to figure out, how do we put that first right up front? How do we highlight the nuances of the product? Because there's a lot of little details in it. And then how do we talk about traction right away?
So if he likes product, does that mean you were starting with a problem and just going straight into here's what our platform is?
Yeah. So before, we were talking more about the problem than talking about our customers and our traction. and then talking a little bit about the product. I changed it to talk more about high-level problem, product through the lens of a customer, and then traction and where we're going and how big it can be.
And that is fundamentally different than most, the way most investors or the way most people react to hearing a pitch, right? Like, and I'm a big, the companies I've worked with over the last couple of years, when I work with them on our investor pitch, we focus so heavily on the problem because I would say 95% or 99% of investors want to know that first before anything else.
Yeah.
In your case, this was a case of focus on the product, but you still covered the problem to some extent, and then just spent the majority of the time on product, right?
Yeah, product and traction is key.
Or product and traction, yeah.
Yeah, and I think too, like, this is just one of those things where you just really do your research and understand what's going to land as well, and what doesn't. Like, how to even like land the end of a pitch. Like, Jason's really big on this. Like, you don't just trail off if you're running over time. Like, you really confidently say, like, I'm Amanda, this is Balloonr, this is what we do. Can't wait for your questions. Like, you end confidently versus trailing off. Like, these little tips that you learn when you do your research are just so key. And I would say they are key to any investor we've landed. It's like, do your research. Because investors are going to look at you if you haven't done your research, and they're going to be like, you didn't Google, right? You didn't just like Google and like read anything, and you're asking for me to give you my money. It feels so disproportionately off. Like, it's so off that it's a hard hurdle for them to ever overcome. So that's like my number one thing is I'm like, do your research always, always.
And when you say like you did research in this case, and in every case, are you like literally like you're typing their name in on Google and just reading like blog posts that he's written and interviews he's been on and where he talks about how he likes to be pitched?
Yeah, exactly. So I just did that research. Again, I was lucky in that Noah was really more familiar than I was with all of these pieces, but I've done that with
co-founder, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And even, we're raising now, and I do tons of research before meetings, because you just don't know also where there's going to be an entry point for a shared connection as well. That's really interesting. Like, maybe you studied the same thing, a long time at school, maybe you grew up even close to each other. I mean, it's really shocking, the shared connection that you can find. Maybe you think about something really similarly, or you experience the same pain point. All those things are such great connecting points for people, especially because if you're a first-time founder and you're coming up in an ecosystem, it helps for people to really kind of have shortcuts to getting to know you, and feel more bonded. And that's so much of it. People have to really trust you if they're going to invest in you. They have to really think you're principled and ethical and all of these things. And so opportunities where you can highlight those shared connections and how you operate, I think, are really powerful.
It sounds like really what you're saying is there's a lot of an element of finesse to this.
Yeah.
All right. It's not just know your numbers. It's not just know your problem statement. It's be able to work the room. Do you have good body language? Can you form common ground with them? Those things like that.
Yeah. It's 100%. That's, it's about preparation and being on it. And all the details, I think, matter so much. And, I think it's both an art and a science. I don't think it's one or the other. I think they're both equally important in the process.
So you gave that initial 2-minute pitch. What, if you recall, what were the questions you got and how did you answer those?
Yeah. So, right after I pitched, he said, I want to move you forward.
Nice.
I'm really, yeah. So it was already good, right? It was already a positive thing. So I was, feeling good. And then the questions were around I'm trying to remember all of them, but around use case, around usage, around questions about anonymity, the positive and the negative side of that. And then interestingly, he asked the room, who would have wanted this product in their company, or who would want this product? And everyone raised their hand, right? And so he mentioned,
so he immediately crowdsourced the viability.
Exactly. Yeah. And then he mentioned, he was yeah, I think there's something really going on here, is what he mentioned. So yeah, it was good energy right away.
You mentioned in that brief 2-minute pitch, you focused more on product and traction. What stage were you at as a company, and what traction were you able to highlight that gets them to say, hey, this is worth looking more at?
Yeah. So, I mean, we obviously had really good revenue. We were landing and expanding customers, which is key. And so really seeing kind of that growth potential. We had raised capital before, and we had a really strong founding team. So I think those pieces as well, I was able to highlight. So, I mean, he really looks for, there's like a Goldilocks zone is what he always calls it. But, like product in market, revenue of a certain range, and, executing, really high executing level. And so I had done that research as well. So I made sure to kind of highlight where we were in that way. And one of the things that like I've noticed, and it's something that Jason comments on a lot, is, when people ask a question, like you give the answer right away. You don't like give all these reasons why it's not where you want it to be. And your credibility just goes up. And so I thought about that a lot when I was answering the question. So, when it's like, I don't remember one of the questions or what it was, but, I just remember I answered it right away with a number. And then it was like, here's what we're doing to make that even better. Just those little tips, I think, were really, really helpful.
Yeah. So can you talk through a couple of those, like how you would, a sample question a founder could get, and then how you would, with what's the standard response and what's the finessed out response?
Yeah. Yeah. I probably won't do it that great. I mean, I'm always, but like, yeah, I can think of an example where it's like, if an investor asks like, how many customers do you have? Right. If a founder is like self-conscious or like nervous that they have too few customers, they might like first give a million reasons why, we just started. We're just getting going with this. We haven't done growth. We haven't done distribution. So we're like around this, but it's going to get a lot better, versus being like, we have 5, we have 10, and this is why we're excited about that number. And this is where it's going. Just having that like concrete answer just helps so much with credibility. And that's something I really learned through Jason, through that program, and it makes a huge difference. And now when I watch other founders pitch, I think so much about that and how much it raises credibility, even through my eyes, right? Or when you're getting sold anything, how much that raises credibility when people just answer so directly and then explain further after they get that direct response.
So give the answer that they want and then explain it. Don't let it sit. Explain it, and explain it with confidence.
Yeah, and maybe don't even explain it. Just be like, we have 5 customers, and then let them answer other questions. Don't like infuse it with your like, being not having confidence or being hyper aware that it's not where you want it, right? Like really strong investors, they've all been founders. They all know where you're at. They see all the good and the bad. So it's all normalized. So just give the answer and don't give it through the lens that's going to bias, right? Their opinion about it.
Do you see, one thing I've come to learn a lot about, and with the women founders I've worked with, I've helped them figure this out, is like, there's the whole, the big news of the last 2 years is like the investor bias against women and even minority groups as well, where that, there was that Harvard Business Review article where it said there's promotion questions and prevention questions. Yeah. And a promotion question would be like, how do you grow this? But a prevention question would be, how many customers do you have? So I'm just a little bit surprised at your response there to say like, maybe just say the number and that's it. Because when I hear that, what I'm thinking back to is that HBR article that's like, well, if you get a prevention question, like how many customers do you have? And you answer it with a prevention response by just answering it, you're shortchanging yourself. So can you help me reconcile that?
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I guess I wouldn't, this is all through the lens of, I wouldn't see that necessarily as like a prevention question. If there's good camaraderie with that investor, like they're really just trying to understand where you're at. But I think that varies so much. Like, it's totally true, right? I mean, it's research backed and everything, right? The different questions you get and how investors respond to you and all these different pieces, right? It's completely all there and present. So I think it's like really assessing what that conversation is and where that falls in the conversation. So if they immediately kind of go in that direction, then I would always try to kind of make it more toward that promotion, that vision, that opportunity space. But if it's like really quick answering questions because they want to know and they need to know, then I would kind of give them the benefit of the doubt in some ways.
So it comes back to read the room.
Yeah, exactly. I think it really depends. And I think so much is like, when it's going well and when it's not going well, and it has to go so well to get an investment from someone. I really don't think that you get investment from like a middle response. It's like everything kind of needs to be right to get that investment.
Last question here before we wrap up. So you obviously went through this specific process to land Jason as your investor, as one of your investors. Now, do you recommend for others? Like literally his LinkedIn profile says, my email is jason@calacanis.com. Do you recommend someone cold emails someone like him or someone like him out of the blue, or is that a bad strategy?
I think he's unique in this way. So I would recommend cold emailing him. I think he responds to almost all of his emails. I know he reads all of them. He talks about that a lot. And that would be like one of those things I think to research, like for that pathway,
do your
right?
homework.
Just like do your homework. What you think makes the most sense there is probably right. I think a lot of angels are actually like that, especially like really aware angels know that they could like miss out on something. So they're always looking, they don't make assumptions. The other angels that we have, who have invested in us, it's similar. Like some of them were more warm intros, but some of them like I just kind of met or they gravitated toward what we were doing. So I don't think there's like a direct, clear path, but they're always, if they're the right angel, they're the right investor, they're going to respect your hustle. They're going to respect your grit. I say like be persistent, but not annoying. All of those kinds of things.
Yeah. Now I'm not going to ask you for where we can find you and your contact information because I'll let everyone know in a second why.
Okay.
There might be more later. Hint, hint. So the way we wrap up every episode, though, is by giving our final takeaway answer to today's topic question. So I'll go first. Our topic today was how do you land a big angel or a popular angel investor? From everything you explained, I think step one is figure out a way to get yourself in the same quote unquote room as them. And I'm doing air quotes here because room could be virtual or it could be physical. How do you get yourself somewhere in their proximity? And then definitely do your homework to present to them in a way that they like to receive information. Yeah. Amanda, how do you land a big angel? Biggest piece of advice you can give other founders?
I mean, exactly those two things. So do your homework, do your research, really know who's out there, who might gravitate toward what you are building, and don't get discouraged. Like no matter what, don't get discouraged. There's always going to be people who like what you're building. There's going to be people who don't like what you're building, but you just have to keep going. I think that's the key.
The reason why I did not ask Amanda to share where we can learn more about her, where we can find her online, et cetera, is because Amanda has the honor of being the first ever guest on this show in 4 years of being on air or on stream, whatever you want to call it, of being a 2-time guest. And what I mean by that is we've had guests come on twice before with like a year apart. We've also done 2-part episodes before, but this is going to be the first time that we have one guest on back-to-back weeks talking about 2 different topics. So tune in next week when Amanda comes back onto the show to talk about how to create a category for your company, which is what Balloonr has had to do in order to get their customers on board. That's going to be a fascinating conversation. So tune in next week to hear all about that, as well as actually get Amanda's contact information. So Amanda, I'll see you next week, but thank you for joining us on the show, at least so far. This was a great conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
That brings us to a close. Did you like what you heard? Did it tingle your earbuds? Support your startup ecosystem and share this episode with another founder to help them. If you don't have anyone in mind, then leave a rating and review of the show on iTunes iTunes so more entrepreneurs can learn about it. And if you want more, head to startuphypeman.com and click on the knowledge section to get a bonus blog post written by this week's guest where they unpack the topic even more. Remember to subscribe to the show on iTunes or Spotify or Google Play or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Startup Hype Man is more than a podcast. In fact, we support startups across the United States and globally develop sales and marketing acumen with messaging that stands out to customers and stands apart from competitors. Learn more and fill out a form at startuphypeman.com if you want to chat. Shout out to this week's guests for spending their time with us, and shout out to music artist Sir the Baptist for providing our show's theme song. Catch you next time. Hype Man out, word up, raise up.
Got you howling at the moon, yeah. This is dance with the devil, girl. Instead of sundown too, yeah. This is dance with the devil, girl. Tell me what you gonna do, this is dance with the devil, girl. And if you can't get it loose, then fall into the truth. It got you howling at the moon, yeah. This is dance with the devil, girl. Instead of sundown, yeah. This is dance with the devil, girl. Tell me what you gonna do, this is dance with the devil, girl. And if you can't get it loose, then it's a dance with the devil.